Before I ever called him my husband, he taught me how to listen to rain, believe in second chances, and hold silence kindly. Tonight I want to invite you into our kitchen, our front porch, our years, and the song we kept humming through storms, celebrations, and ordinary miracles together. If this love story warms you, like, subscribe, share, and comment a memory that keeps your heart steady below today. I like to start with the sound of the kettle. It's a small thing, the kind of sound you don't notice until you've gone without it for a week. A steady, rising whisper, the sigh of water remembering its purpose. That's this story, too. It's about the sound of things warming up, the way ordinary moments come to a shimmer, and how you find the courage to pour and share what they've made with someone who stands in your doorway, smiling like he's seen every version of you and already decided to stay. My husband's name is Ben. I didn't know the word husband would one day be mine to say about him when I met him at the hardware store aisle 5. Beneath a squeaky fluorescent light that made the bolts and screws look like a treasure chest of dull stars. I say met, but I mean blundered, because I reached for a can of wood stain at the exact second he did, and I knocked not one, but 6 cans off the shelf. They hit the floor like timpani. Thud, 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 and the clerk, a young guy with a mullet and a name tag that said Dwayne, groaned like we had personally ruined his afternoon. "It's all right, Dwayne," Ben said, crouching down with me to gather the cans and line them up like soldiers ready to apologize. "We'll pick it up." He looked at me then, the way people look at a friend they're about to meet even if they don't know it yet. He had a dimple he kept trying to hide with seriousness. His knuckles were nicked, carpenter nicks, the kind you earn using your hands. He smelled faintly like cedar chips. I will go on with the story, but I want to pause and say this. Sometimes people tell you that love reveals itself with a bolt of lightning. Mine was a slow lamp turning on, but that day at the hardware store the cord got plugged in. "I'm Ray," I said, sticking out my hand. "Ben," he said, and shook it. His palm was warm, dry, steady. "What are you staining?" "A bookshelf," I told him, as if this mattered deeply. "For my living room." "I'm aiming for good enough," Ben laughed, that dimple reappearing, and nodded toward the can I'd been reaching for. "That color'll do it. Not too proud, not too sad." We walked together to the register, him carrying half the cans, me carrying the rest. Outside, the sky was knitting itself into rain, gray threads pulled snug and ready. I was the one who said it. "You want a coffee?" It was the kind of sentence you can retract without embarrassment if the other person hesitates. But Ben didn't hesitate. He squinted toward the diner across the street, the one with the neon sign that said Bluebird, and a window that always steamed up when it was raining. "I never say no to coffee," he replied, and we stood under the awning while the rain remembered how to fall. Then ran across when we realized it had made up its mind. If you've ever sat at a diner booth with someone who might alter the rest of your life, you know how the texture of the vinyl sticks to your skin longer than it should. How the coffee is too hot at first and then suddenly perfect. How the waitress calls you hon, in the exact tone your grandmother used when she meant, "I see you." The Bluebird had those browned pie tins, stacked behind the counter like records waiting for a quieter day. It smelled like syrup and something comforting I could never identify, maybe hope, maybe bacon grease. Ben talked like a person who had practiced listening. When I told him I taught at the high school, English, he asked me what book had surprised me lately. When he told me he worked with his brother installing ramps and building railings and fixing porches after winters undid their joints, I asked him if he liked to see things become safer. He looked at his hands like he hadn't considered it that way, then nodded. "I like when people can stay in their houses a little longer because of what we did," he said. "I like that the world is less treacherous by an inch." That was the first time I thought, oh, this is a person who moves through the world making small, steady repairs that add up to kindness. My heart cracked open a door and peeked through. We sat there until the rain quieted and the neon sign hummed like a friendly bug. He asked me if I wanted a slice of pie, and I said, "Truth, I always do, but I have to get these cans home before I get too full of sugar to focus." We exchanged numbers on the backs of receipts because this was before every story ran through a palm-sized galaxy. His handwriting was simple, no flourishes. The way you'd write your name on a lunch bag you intend to come back to. I was 31. I had practiced loneliness like a language I could get by in. Enough words to make it through a day. A few phrases that meant I belong here when I entered a grocery store or a staff meeting. The simple declarative sentences of I am fine and I don't need help. In the years since, people have tried to romanticize that time, call it independent, call it pure. I won't lie. There were moments of self-sufficiency that felt like walking on a trail and hearing the creek say your name. But there were also nights when the only light on in my apartment was the red standby dot on the VCR, and the only sound was the refrigerator counting time. If you've ever taught teenagers, you know how it is to go from the clamor of their energy to the hush of your own kitchen in the same hour. It's a drop you have to learn how to make gently. I called him 2 days later because it seemed polite to wait, but unkind to both of us, to pretend I wasn't thinking about him. We didn't schedule it like a business meeting. It was more like two people letting an idea drive. We went to the county fair, walked past the pickle jar competition, and the quilts hung like flags of a tender nation. He touched my elbow once to guide me around a puddle that had a personality. We ate corn dogs out of necessity and laughed at the goats that laughed at us. And it was there, by the Ferris wheel that still had its paint because it clung to it with stubbornness, that he said something I still keep on the shelf above the sink. I want to be careful with you. I had known how to be careful around people. He taught me what it felt like to be careful with someone. There's a way you hold a hand like it's both delicate and strong, like it's a jar of preserves you put up in summer and intend to open in winter in front of a fire. That was how he held mine. Not in public. We were still learning what kind of town we lived in, what kind of fairness the air could hold. But once, on the way back to his truck, he brushed his pinky against mine and the Ferris wheel lit up like it agreed. Now, I won't string you along. This isn't a story with a twist where you find out we were cousins or the diner burned down on the night we were supposed to meet. This is a story where the twist is how many ordinary things turned extraordinary just because we looked at them together. We began collecting them. He showed me the trick of finding a flat, smooth stone that feels like a pocket prayer. I showed him the spot near the river where the cottonwoods let down their summer snow. He bought a second toothbrush for his house before he knew he'd need it. I thrifted 2 of the same cereal bowl because I had decided, before he had, that oatmeal tastes better when you don't eat it alone. We kept a light on. We kept 2 mugs at the ready. I learned how to share a grocery list without scolding, which sounds small but took practice. He learned not to fix every loose hinge before I could point at it and say I noticed too. If you've ever blended furniture and habits, you know it's like braiding hair you've never brushed before, gentle, forgiving. And sometimes you start over without making a big deal of it. Before we told anyone, we told ourselves the truth. We sat on his porch after a dinner of spaghetti cooked past al dente because we'd gotten to talking, and he said, eyes on the yard, I didn't think I'd get this. This, meaning me, meaning us, meaning the exact combination of gentle teasing and serious promises that had come into view. Me neither, I said. The cicadas sang like they were auditioning for the symphony. He touched my knee and I knew the word for it. Belonging. My mother met him like he was the last piece of a puzzle she'd been keeping on the card table for months. She hugged him and asked if he was allergic to walnuts because her brownie recipe makes no exceptions. My father took longer, which I know is a sentence some of you can cover with your own, and the filling will be the same. Doubt like an old coat he couldn't quite take off. A pause he tried to fill with sports talk. A glance at the television when there was nothing on but moving colors. He didn't say anything unkind. He didn't say anything at all about it for a while, which can be its own kind of unkind. But Ben was patient without being meek. He asked my father about the time he ran the county snowplow through the blizzard of '85 and didn't get stuck once. He laughed at the right parts. He took his boots off at the door, and after dinner he helped my mother wrap leftovers in foil in such a deliberate way that my father, in spite of himself, leaned back and surveyed the neat packages like ships. "Looks like you've done that before," he said. Ben nodded. "I like when things make sense later." My father chewed that answer for a couple of weeks and then, one night when I was helping him replace a porch light, said, entirely to the fixtures and entirely to me, "He's steady." Steady is the word I'd leave you if I had to stop talking now. But I'm lucky. I've got more time. We lived in our separate places for a year in a way that wasn't exactly separate. We learned each other's morning habits before we committed to them becoming our morning. He sleeps with a window cracked even in January because he trusts blankets and likes air that's done some traveling. I shuffle into the kitchen and put coffee on before I brush my teeth, a sin some people can't abide. He hums while he performs tasks he's done before, a piece of a tune, the middle part, no beginning or end. I read while stirring things I don't want to burn, which I learned is a bad idea unless you consider a slightly smoky flavor a personality trait of the food. About the house. People imagine queer love as high drama, which is wrong and unkind because what we have practiced is low stakes done well. The house we found had a front door that stuck in summer, a basement that smelled like pennies and old newspapers, a kitchen with a linoleum floor printed to look like someone else's kitchen. It had a yard with a sagging fence and a lilac bush that was auditioning for spring from the middle of November. The realtor looked between us as if trying to calculate something that could be uncalculated. When we walked through the rooms, we didn't look at each other, which was our own kind of superstition. We didn't want to scare the house away by loving it too soon. But I could see in Ben's shoulders the way they relaxed when he stepped onto the back porch. I could feel that my heart had found a windowsill it liked. We made the offer, and the house accepted us, which is how I prefer to phrase it. We painted the living room a color the store called winter wheat, and we called unassuming. The trim went white because certain decisions are reliable. We pulled up carpet like we were peeling bandages and found hardwood with a history but no scarring we couldn't sand away. I share this not because home improvement is inherently romantic. It is not. It is dusty and invites petty arguments about whether a quarter inch is really a quarter inch. But because making a home together is how we wrote our vows before we had the right to say them in public. If you were to look through our kitchen drawer, the one with coupons, rubber bands, and the manual for an appliance we don't own anymore, you'd find a grocery list from that first fall. His handwriting and mine, switching off, items that tell a story all by themselves. Oatmeal, blueberries, cumin, a brand of dog treats we hadn't bought yet but were imagining. Because yes, let me introduce Moxie. She wasn't a planned addition to the household. She was a small, elderly beagle who wandered onto our porch one afternoon and slept in a sun square like she was auditioning for permission. We fed her water and then we fed her our hearts. We looked for her owner for weeks and never found them, or maybe we did, and we just looked in the mirror. Moxie taught us that love doesn't always arrive at the exact moment you order it. Sometimes it sits down first, tilts its head as if to ask you to hurry up and notice, and then stays with you through 12 more winters than anyone thought possible. We did not rush. We also did not hide. There is a difference. We went to barbecues where someone said "your friend" and did not flinch. We bought a snowblower together because the driveway didn't care who was pushing it. We joined the neighborhood association where Mrs. Alvarez welcomed us with a lemon cake she called "too easy to brag about," and bragged about anyway. We made a habit of inviting people who didn't get invited much, which included the widower 2 houses over who always wore his navy cap, and the young woman with a shy laugh who worked the night shift at the hospital and made casseroles on Sundays to get her through 3 days of tired. When you have known what it is to feel outside, you build longer tables. I don't say that to sound virtuous. I say it because we had figured out a trick. The more people you welcome, the better the coffee tastes. The more the house remembers laughter when you're gone and keeps it for later. When the first big storm of our life together arrived, it arrived like storms do, without regard for whether the pantry was ready. There was a briskness in the evenings that October, a promise of things turning inside out. We had carved pumpkins with Moxie observing like a foreman, and we had left them on the porch, faces kinder than scary. The weather report said wind and the kind of rain that pushes you sideways. In the middle of the night, the storm showed up angry. The fence fell into the yard like a tired soldier. A branch snapped and said a word I won't repeat on this family program. We lost power. Now here is where I discovered the superpower of my husband that is not flashy but is better. He does not pretend he isn't afraid, and he does not let fear make him mean. He reached for my hand in the dark, found it, squeezed it, and said, "We're okay," not as a magic trick or a denial, but as a reminder of a fact we could hold even as the house shifted. We moved the freezer food into coolers and put the coolers on the back porch, because winter was practicing on us. We lit candles and called the neighbors who we knew lived alone. "Come over if you get cold," he said into his phone, like he was reading the weather a poem. We fell asleep with Moxie between us like a small, warm punctuation mark. In the morning, we found the lilac bush bent but unbroken. He went out with a saw and made the branch that had fallen less menacing. I made oatmeal, our house still smelling like grain and patience, and we took our bowls to the porch and watched as the neighborhood opened its eyes one by one. Those are the mornings that make a life, not the anniversaries, not the fancy dinners, just the days you decide to make gentle again, together. You're waiting for the hard part, I know. It's not a story if nothing goes wrong. I won't dramatize the wrongness because it was already dramatic enough. During the winter of 1993, our friend Marco got sick. He had a laugh like a brass bell, and the kind of dance moves that made you think he had passed physics class by being very persuasive. I had known him since college. Ben had come to love him like you do with someone who knows all your stories and tells them better. It was the time when you watched the news and learned too much and still not enough, when rumors carried facts on their shoulders and people whispered them even as they looked away. Marco moved into our spare room because hospitals, at the time, did not offer a bed for chosen family when they could help it. He stayed 2 months, and then he didn't. On the day he died, the light outside our window was the shape of kindness across the floor. Ben sat on the edge of the bed and lifted a glass to Marco's lips when he could sip. He folded towels so precisely it looked like he was trying to keep dignity from wrinkling. We learned how to talk to nurses as if they were us, which they were, tired and brave. I do not want to turn my love story into a lesson, but I'll tell you what we learned without permission that winter. The only cure for helplessness is presence. When Marco's sister came to gather his things, she hugged us both with the kind of hug that changes the room temperature. "Thank you for loving him like that," she said. I know what she meant. And I also want to tell you that 2 weeks later, when I cried into Ben's flannel shirt so hard I forgot my own name, he said into my hair, "I'm here." He never pretended he had the right words. He just kept showing up with his hands, his steadiness, the way he could stand quietly in a doorframe and become a door. I thought we came out when we told our families. It turned out we came out the rest of our lives. To neighbors, to co-workers, to the man at the DMV who squinted at the form and then at us, like we had invented a new category that required a new stamp. We did it gently. We did it by saying "my husband" just loud enough to make our own hearts believe it. When laws changed, we were on the road faster than we packed for anything else. We drove to Massachusetts because that was where someone would hand us a piece of paper that meant we could be what we already were. And then, years later, we got to do it again in our own county courthouse, where the clerk had stickers on her water bottle for the local softball team and the national parks. The first time, we stood under a maple tree in a park and exchanged rings that had waited patiently on top of the dresser for days. The second time, the judge who performed the ceremony was a woman with a voice like country roads, solid, familiar, a little gravel. She said what she was supposed to say, the words the law had given us. When she pronounced it, when she said husbands, I watched my husband's face do the thing it does when something true gets recognized in public. His eyebrows lifted. He breathed like he had been under a pool and found the surface, and then he cried in that very masculine way of experiencing a blink that lasts a full minute. We went out to lunch afterward because we have always believed in the sacrament of sandwiches. We called my mother. We called his brother. We called the neighborhood association president because she had threatened to come down to the courthouse with confetti if we didn't tell her. And then we went home, where someone had tied a string of cans to our porch railing like we were a car that had just gotten married. One of the cans said in permanent marker, "About time." What you need to know about our years is that they are filled with things that would bore someone looking for spectacle, and they are sparkling if you know what matters. We have a drawer of takeout menus with a rubber band around them that cuts into the pages. We argue about what constitutes done toast. We have watched, faithfully, a particular anchor deliver the evening news, and then retire and then return for a special and then retire again. We have a shelf of books that we pretend we will downsize soon, and we never do, because letting go of an old paperback is hard if you're sentimental like we are. We know which floorboard near the hall closet complains, and we step on it anyway, because the sound belongs to the orchestra of our house. People have asked me for advice, which is both flattering and a little silly. Everybody's math is different. But this is what we do. We tell the truth sooner than we used to. We touch when it would be easy not to. We apologize like we mean it, and then we try not to say but. We don't keep score. We do keep receipts, mostly because there's a satisfaction to seeing 2 baguettes written down that has nothing to do with taxes. We say each other's names often, even in empty rooms, which convinces the air that love exists and will continue. I could tell you about 1,000 small moments because that is how I measure our life. The afternoon he taught our niece to change a tire in the driveway while I handed them lemonade and moral support. The evening we danced in the living room to a record I found at a yard sale, the needle catching slightly in a place that made us repeat the good part. The morning he woke me with coffee in a mug that said, "World's okayest husband," because I had rolled my eyes at grand declarations, and he understood the joke. The time the kitchen sink refused to drain and we stood shoulder to shoulder, our arms deep in suds, fishing out a clump of spaghetti and laughing so hard it turned into a story we tell at parties like it's Shakespeare. There was a hospital, too. There are always hospitals if you live long enough. He felt a pain he couldn't explain that Christmas Eve morning, the kind you want to argue with but shouldn't. He said it wasn't a big deal with the voice that means it might be. I put on my coat over pajamas and didn't bother with socks in my boots. The ER smelled like sanitizer and peppermint someone spilled on purpose. The doctor asked questions we answered like a duet, the call and response of a couple who knows the other's medical history better than their own. It was a scare. I won't walk through the details because your body knows how to fill them in. What matters is this. He gripped my hand at 3 a.m. and said, "Quiet. Don't be brave without me." I promised. He promised back, without words, by staying. After that, we became those people who walk in the mornings, slow at first, then faster when confidence remembered our address. We learned the names of parks we had driven by for years and the polite habits of the retirees who feed birds with devotion. He started saying "I love you" as if he had suddenly remembered it was possible to leave things unsaid and decided he would not. It wasn't that we hadn't said it before. It was that the words acquired a dailiness that made me understand why people pray before meals. Moxie would get ahead of us on the sidewalk and then look back as if to hurry us along so we wouldn't miss the sunrise. She was right. They are easy to miss. I am thinking about the piece of music that is the sound of our house at night. The refrigerator hum. The wind deciding how it wants to touch the maple outside. The dog's old dog dreams. My husband breathing to my left. If this is too sentimental for your taste, I hear you. I would have felt that way when I was 22 and sure that love had to be proofed in public like a loaf of bragging. But I am older now, and I will tell you, the music your life makes when you know you are safe is better than any anthem. Ben once said when he thought I was asleep, "Thank you," into the dark. When I asked him later what he was thanking, he said, "I don't know. Maybe everything that led me here." The thing about being together this long is that we have our rhythms and we keep discovering new ones. We have our separate corners and then we meet in the middle with something we both care about. We volunteer because it reminds us that our house isn't the only house. He builds ramps. I help with literacy classes at the library, where once a grown man sounded out the word spring and looked up at me as if he had bitten into an apple he didn't expect to be so good. We do the things that suit us. He is the one who talks to the checkout clerk like he knows her cousin. I am the one who writes notes on Post-its and sticks them to the calendar. He is better at picking ripe melons. I am better at picking battles. Between us, we do all right. People still surprise us. One Saturday, we set up a table at the farmer's market to raise money for the new roof on the community center. Ben had made birdhouses from scrap wood, sanded and painted in colors that looked like those old county fair quilts, teals and mustard, and a red that had decided to be nice. A man I recognized from downtown came up, looked at the birdhouses without touching, and then cleared his throat. He was the same age as us, maybe a little younger, with a wedding ring he kept fiddling. "You two married?" he asked, in the voice of someone standing at the edge of his own permission. Ben said yes. The man nodded, bought a birdhouse, then asked if we'd sign the bottom. "Is that a thing?" I asked, my teacher brain automatically trying to categorize it. I just want to remember I saw you, he said. He came back the next week and bought another. Our biggest fight, since you're waiting for one, was not about money or in-laws or even whether to put ketchup in the fridge. We do. We will not be swayed. It was about a rug. I am not kidding. A rug he bought without me. He saw it in the window of a store downtown, a blue so deep it nearly convinced water to be jealous, with a pattern that looked like someone had taught geometry to a river. He brought it home rolled up like a proposition. I love it, he said. I didn't. I thought it made the room look like a brochure. We stood there, the two of us, and had the kind of argument people write down in journals because it reveals more about us than it should. About taste. About who gets to decide. About all the times you don't buy the rug, and the one time you do, and the weight of compromise pretending to be a textile. We went to bed mad, which we don't like to do, and in the morning I came into the living room and found him sitting on the rug, cross-legged, Moxie sleeping beside him, and a cup of coffee in his hand. You know, he said sheepishly, the rug is just a rug. And I sat down too, the rug softer than I wanted it to be. The coffee steamed between us like a small peace treaty, and we laughed until we let it go. I want to tell you about a Wednesday that looked like 1,000 Wednesdays but felt like a first. He had gone to work early because a ramp needed installing before a man could get discharged from rehab. I had an evening meeting at the library because planning committees breed more committees. On my way home, I passed the baseball field. Lights on, kids sliding into bases like their pants could be sacrificed to glory, parents cheering in a code that felt familiar. I stopped at the drive-thru for milkshakes because maturity and health are important, and so is joy. I walked into our kitchen, set the milkshakes on the counter and the paper bag of fries like a bouquet, and he came in the back door just then, smelled salt and potatoes, and laughed. "You're reading my mind," he said, and kissed me like the person you live with who has still not become ordinary. That's what I want to say. He has not become ordinary, even when the rest of our life is. We don't do big Valentine's Day gestures, not out of stinginess, but because we decided to distribute that energy across the calendar. We do leave notes on the dashboard of his truck. Don't forget, you are loved, and also get onions. Taped to my book on the nightstand. Page 232 will surprise you. Also, what do you want for breakfast? On the bathroom mirror. Handsome, toothpaste on your chin, please meet me on the porch. People say the spark fades. Maybe the spark does, but the glow settles in and learns how to keep a room warm. That's not a metaphor. That's my living room at 7 p.m. December. The tree we bought at the lot by the senior center up-tilted because our floor is honest. The dog snoring, the two of us with our feet touching under a thrifted quilt. The world complicated, unfair, brilliant, and for this hour, kind. If you're listening and aching because you haven't found this, I want to say something tender. I didn't do anything to deserve it. I did not manifest it by being good or behave myself into eligibility. I got lucky the way people get lucky who go to the hardware store on Wednesdays and learn how to ask for coffee. I did, however, try to be courageous in the places where fear would have been easier, telling the truth about who I am, loving out loud even when the volume made my voice shake, and learning how to let someone in without apologizing for the mess. If you are building a life you don't have to explain to anyone but yourself, I am cheering for you. If you are building one you intend to share, leave the window cracked. The air that moves through might bring somebody who knows how to hum. We have now reached the part where I tell you something about age. We are not young in the way of TV shows with clean kitchens and promising music cues. We are young in the way of trees that bend and realize they can. He finds new gray in his beard like a glitter he did not order. I make more lists than I used to and lose them in new places. We go to more funerals than one would prefer. We also go to graduation parties and cranberry carving contests where our niece tells jokes into a microphone and we stand in the back, wiping our eyes because she pronounces every syllable like a victory. We take naps and we take vitamins and we take the scenic route when we could get there faster. We find ourselves in long lines at the pharmacy where people tell their life stories to strangers. And we listen because it's practice. Once, a boy, 16, hat on backward, shoulders as if held up by question marks, knocked on our door. He was selling discount cards for the soccer team. He kept looking at the ground. Ben asked him questions because that's his way. What position do you play? Do you like the coach? Do you prefer offense or defense? The boy answered in a register meant for safe confession. When he got to defense, he said it like he had thought about it more than he meant to admit. I'm good at protecting people, he said. Ben looked at me and I looked at Ben because we were thinking the same thing. Good skill, Ben said. I think you already know how to use it. We bought the card. On the back, you could see where the pen had hesitated. Later, we saw that boy at a parade holding hands with a boy with a soft haircut. And the way they looked at each other made me feel like the sun had left a note on our porch. Good job. We have a saying in our house when one of us is being ridiculous. We don't have to audition for each other. It began when I practiced a speech for a meeting I dreaded. And Ben, sitting at the table with a screwdriver and a wooden hinge, looked up and said, I already chose you. I married a man who decides daily to keep choosing. If I could give you the feeling of watching him read the local paper like it's the New York Times because he cares that Marcy's Diner is switching suppliers for their hash browns, I would. If I could tuck into your pocket the way his hand rests on my knee when he drives, the way he nods to bikers on the trail as if they are neighbors, the way he keeps an extra pen in the glove compartment and an extra sweater in the back seat because the world is not always temperate, I would. I want to tell you we slow dance in the kitchen. And I want to tell you that we sometimes step on each other's toes because the rug is in the wrong place, or because the song changes and our memory doesn't. We do not live inside a commercial. Sometimes the coffee is too bitter. Sometimes the check engine light comes on and we get quiet in the way that means we're both doing the math of what it could be and not saying it. Sometimes he comes home tired and I am overfull of words, and there is a mismatch we have to gently smooth with care and a plate of something warm. But under it all is the decision we keep making. That is love older than rehearsal, the decision to sit back down at the table and ask, tell me about your day, even when you think you know all the answers. He still surprises me with the way he describes a sunrise after a job that took him into a new neighborhood. I still surprise him by crying at a commercial where a person rescues a plant. We are, this is the word, ongoing. On our 30th anniversary, the one counted from the day the maple tree witnessed our rings, we invited everyone. We strung lights in the yard and borrowed folding chairs from the church that always has too many because they never say no. I grilled while he monitored the coleslaw ratio like he had a PhD in balance. Our niece baked a cake that leaned a bit, like it was listening. Mrs. Alvarez brought the lemon cake again and got a round of applause. Our neighbor, the widower, told a joke he'd told before, and we laughed like it was new because it had earned that respect. When we stood to say a few words because our friends forced us to, Ben cleared his throat and said, I am grateful for the way you all gave us back to ourselves, and also for Ray's patience in the hardware store that day. I said something about the way the world sometimes opens a door, and sometimes we have to build one. And then my father, who does not make speeches, lifted his plastic cup and said, to steadiness. He is not alive now, but I have that sound in my pocket, a toast that blesses instead of explains. It is late where you are, maybe. The kettle has boiled and been poured and the tea grown drinkable. The part of me that is a teacher wants to give you homework. I won't. I will give you an invitation. Tonight, before you go to bed, say the name of the person you love out loud, or the name of the person you hope to, or your own name which deserves it. Be kind to that name. Tell it you are building a house around it, sturdy, surprising, imperfect, U-shaped. If you are lonely right now, I will tell you what I needed someone to tell me. Your life is already generous. And if you find yourself standing in aisle 5 under a light that hums, reaching for the same thing as someone who will one day know how you take your toast, forgive yourself your clumsiness. Let the cans fall, laugh, help each other pick them up, go get coffee. When I am very old and someone asks me for advice, I hope I remember not to give too much. I hope I remember to say, invite the breeze in even in winter. Call your mother if you can, and if you can't, make someone soup. Keep one good pen in the kitchen drawer. Learn the names of the people who stand behind counters and wish them a good morning that means it. Do not be stingy with I love you. Look at your person when they tell a story they have told before like it's new. You will not regret the days you spent paying attention. You will not remember the days you stayed busy instead. And if you get to say it, say my husband like a small prayer. The privilege of it, the way those words were once a hill too steep to climb and are now the path we walk every day, has not worn off. It still tastes like the afternoon we spent on the courthouse bench waiting our turn to be ordinary and blessed. Sometimes, when it rains, we turn off the TV and sit by the window and do nothing but listen. He will put his hand on my knee or my wrist, palm down, like he's anchoring me to the exact place we are. The dog knew now because Moxie had to go where the good dogs rest and we said no more dogs and then we said okay, fine, climbs onto the rug and sighs. We think of the people we've loved and the people we've lost and the way the water finds its way to the places it's supposed to go. He will say, "Remember the maples in Massachusetts?" And I will nod. "Remember Marco's laugh?" And I will say it out loud, do my best to bring it back fully for a minute. "Remember the bluebird's pie?" And we will argue about which pie was best, and we will both be wrong and right. Because when you talk about the good pie you ate with your husband at a diner on a rainy day when you knocked over the cans and the world picked them up for you, you are not talking about pie. You are talking about learning how to keep a light on. There is a photograph on the mantle of us not long after we moved in. We are sitting on the floor, backs against the couch that used to belong to my aunt. A pizza box between us because painting makes hunger and patience melt. Ben's head is tilted back, his mouth open in a laugh that's going to make him cough. My head is tilted toward him like my body knew the shape of the rest of my life before I did. People see the photo and say we look young. We were, but here is the secret. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of us now in the dark window when we are doing the dishes, our reflection clear enough to be a postcard, and we look exactly the same. Not because our faces haven't changed. They have, in ways that tell the story of the years like rings in a tree, but because the pose is the same. His shoulder pressed against my shoulder, my hip against his, our hands reaching for the same plate, water warm, soap making constellations. That is what I came to tell you. That I married a man, not because it would make a headline, but because it would make a quiet, enduring song that I could hum in line at the bank and in the bleachers at a winter basketball game and in a hospital hallway that smells like fear and in a kitchen on a Tuesday when the light decides to be generous. And now I'll turn off the kettle, top off our mugs, and go find him where he is probably tightening a screw that does not need tightening just to make the world click into place. I will tell him that I told you about him. He will pretend to be bashful and then he will stand a little taller because even steady men like to be known. He will ask what you said about his rug. I will say you liked it. He will grin and say, "See? We will sit on that rug and decide whether the forecast means we should bring in the herbs we thought might make it through October. We will argue lightly about oregano. We will let the dog out, and then in, and then out again. Because there is a squirrel who thinks it owns the wheat-colored fence we repaired after the storm. We will plan to call our niece and we will forget. And we will text her a picture of pie and she will forgive us because she knows we are easily distracted by butter and sugar. We will stack the mail on the table the way we always do. A small mess we are not ashamed of. We will live and live some more. Now and then, when I'm feeling brave and sentimental, I'll open the drawer with the coupons and the rubber bands and the notes we never threw away. I'll unfold the receipt from the diner with his number on it. The ink faded just so, the numbers still legible. And I'll imagine the man I was, sitting at a booth under a neon bird, not yet knowing the shape of the life that would bloom from a puddle-dodging, elbow-guiding, coffee-drinking afternoon. I'll say a quiet thank you to that version of me for dialing. I'll say a loud thank you to the man who answered. And then I'll close the drawer and go find my husband. Because the light is nice and the chair on the porch has our names on it, and there is a breeze that has traveled far to get here, and it would be a shame to keep it waiting.